Hello, this is Miss Brown, and today we're going to begin our study of genetics, sometimes what's called Mendelian genetics. Let me apologize right off the bat. Number one, there's some construction going on next door, so I can't help if you hear a drill or a hammer going on. And also, it's a very rainy day, so you may hear a thunderstorm or a rainstorm during this short presentation. So you have your organizer, and this is going to be the front page of this one. All right, so number one, genetics and heredity. It deals with the passing of traits from parents to offspring, and not just eye color and hair color and how tall you are, but many things, susceptibility to diseases, sometimes personality traits, things you're good at. There's all sorts of things that get passed down from your parents. All right, Gregor Mendel, he is the father of genetics. He was a monk. He studied pea plants in the monastery garden. We already had a talk about him, and there will be a video about him. Peas have a variety of traits he could study, and some of the traits that he studied, let's see, you filled in number 2. He was the father of genetics, and he was a monk. Number 3, he studied pea plants in the monastery garden. And some of the traits he studied in peas, height, color, flower color, pod color. Were they yellow or green? There were several different ones. Just list a couple. Probably height was the most well remembered, and probably flower color. All right, 5, Mendel developed the laws of genetics. All right, number 6, he didn't even call them genes. He didn't know about genes at this time. He called them factors. So these factors we know now are units of DNA, and they later became known as genes. So one little spot on your DNA or one little spot on a chromosome, that's the gene. All right, so genes, again, they are units of heredity made from DNA, and they're located on the chromosomes. Now, these factors, number 8, these factors occur in pairs, and you get one from each parent, and they're found inside the gametes. And you remember the gametes only have one of each chromosome, so you get one of each of these factors or genes as we know of them today. All right, I'm sorry, I'm going to go backwards. 9, the alternate forms of a gene are called alleles, right here at the top. An example, brown or blue eyes, light or dark hair color, tall or short. Okay. Now, these alleles can be dominant, this is number 10, or recessive. Now, underneath in that little space underneath dominant, I want you to write capital letter. So that's what we call the big letter. Okay. And recessive, underneath that, put little letter or lowercase letter. And we'll be working several problems on this in the next class meeting and learning about this. All right. 11, Mendel's law of dominance. Dominant genes mask the expression of recessive alleles. They're still there. But the dominant one is the one that shows. Okay, it covers it up. Now, these traits can be what he called pure breeding, and examples of that, number 12, big B, or little b, or big T, or little t. Just put an example in there. Or they can be heterozygous, and that means different. That means you get one of each. So that could be big B, or big T, little t, or many other combinations that we'll get to in a day or two. Now, the genotype itself, those are the actual alleles. For instance, I have blue eyes, so my actual alleles is little b. So if someone asks for my genotype for eye color, for Miss Brown, it'd be little b. Okay? But the phenotype is what you actually look like. It has nothing to do with these letters. You just say blue eyes. You know, of course, if you know me, my phenotype for height is tall. Okay? So you can remember that by genes is in the genotype, and phenotype, physical appearance. Now, this Mendel's law of segregation said genes or alleles in a pair will separate to form the gametes. Okay, so you only give one. Even though I have 2 blue-eye genes, I only gave one to each of my children. I can only give one at a time. Okay. Now, law of probability is just like tossing a coin. You might say, well, we had a boy this time, we'll have a girl next time. No. You might say, this one had brown eyes, but the next one will have blue eyes. No, it doesn't work that way, because every time it's a chance. And you might say, well, how does that work out? And I always give the example that my dad's family had 3 boys, but across the street was a family that had 3 girls. So it evens out when you look at a large population. It's just like tossing a coin. Every time you have the same chances every time. All right, Punnett square. I know you've done these with Miss Trollo. It's a grid system. Rule number 17, and it has spaces for the gamete and for the offspring. We'll be working several of these here in a day or two. Now, there are different kinds of crosses. There's a monohybrid cross. It involves only one trait, and those are very simple, and they're mostly what we will do in 9th grade. Now, number 19, the dihybrid cross. We'll look at a few of those. Those involve 2 traits. They're more complex. You will do more of those when you go up in your science study with Miss Evans. She does those over in the science building. All right, number 20, this Mendel's law of independent assortment. It says each allele separates independently of another one. So that gives you a variety. It's why we're all different. Every one of us is different. Okay, then there's this thing called incomplete dominance. It produces a blended trait. Red flower and a white flower in certain things, like this thing called a 4 o'clock makes pink flowers. Minks, they make coats. Those have been kind of not popular. They've been in the news a lot lately because of COVID. A black mink and a white mink will make a gray mink. And cows, a red cow and a white cow will make a roan. I'll show you a picture of that. It's not really a pink cow. Sometimes we work these problems, the kid get excited and they'll put pink cow. It's not pink. It's just a mix between the two. When you see a picture, you'll know it. You've seen them before going down the road. If you've never been around cows much, you'll know one when you see it. All right, autosomes and sex chromosomes. We've learned about this before, 22. Autosomes, are the 22 pairs that make up your body traits. Okay, and your sex chromosomes are X and Y, and that's one pair that controls your gender. Now, then we do have some traits called sex-linked traits, and they're carried on the X chromosome. We'll be looking at those later. Examples of that is colorblindness and hemophilia, which is free bleeders' disease. And that has to do with your parents' X chromosomes, and if you were a boy or girl, that's why it's called sex-linked, or sometimes called gender-linked traits. Now, sex-influenced traits, they're influenced by your hormones. An example of that is baldness in men. If a male gets the baldness gene, he will go bald when he hits puberty, when he starts pumping out testosterone. But females often have the baldness gene but never go bald because they don't have mostly testosterone. Sometimes that happens later in life after they go through the change of life or through menopause, and they don't have as much estrogen. Sometimes older women do have thinning hair and lose some of their hair as they get older. Now, there are some things called multiple allele inheritance, and this is blood type. So I want you to write down the example is blood type, and we'll do some problems about this. Again, today's lesson is about just getting your information down on paper and pencil, and then we're going to actually apply this and use it together. Now, some genetic disorders. Some of these we've learned about before. Go ahead and write down 3. Pick 3 of these. One of them is Down syndrome. We learned how that worked already. PKU, phenylketonuria. It's a missing genetic enzyme. It's one of the first tests they run on you when you go back to the doctor after you're born. You go back when you're about 10 days old, and they do a little bleed on your foot and check you for that. Albinism or albino, that is inherited. Sickle cell anemia, that's a genetic defect. We learned about that already, about the blood. And cystic fibrosis, this is a defect that causes thick mucus to clog up the respiratory organs. And we have a problem about that will work coming up. Now, we learned a lot about mutations already. I just want you to write for 27. I want you to write it's a change in DNA. And out beside it, I want you to put these 2 different types. Somatic cell, it only affects the person involved, like skin cancer. You know, skin cancer is caused by the sun. So if you get too much sun, you get skin cancer sometimes, but that doesn't mean you can pass that cancer on to your child. But a reproductive cell, that's the second type, a reproductive cell or a gamete type of mutation, you can pass on like albinism. Okay, and let's look at 28. Pedigree chart. We'll learn to read one of these here in a day or two. Go ahead and write that it traces a trait through the generations. It traces a trait through the generations. And I want you to write this phrase then below it. It can show who has the trait, who does not have the trait, and who is a carrier of this trait. Okay, thank you.